I want to be governor because I think we need a governor that's actually trying to make progress on issues that affect people's lives on a day-to-day basis and who's going to stand up for every single person in this state. One of the things I love about Massachusetts is we have always been a leader. We have always believed we can overcome any challenge if we put our mind to it and we work for it. We've got a governor right now that doesn't see the job that way. He's basically accepting the world the way it exists and trying to manage it better. I think we need a governor that's going to see the way the world should be and take us to that place. I think we should be aiming higher. I think we should be working hard to make sure that childcare and preschool is affordable for every single family in this state. That we've got a transportation system that people can actually depend on to get to work on time. A single-payer healthcare system that's simpler, cheaper, and does a better job keeping people healthy. We've got lots of big challenges we face, whether it's climate change, our broken criminal justice system, and lots of other issues that are holding people back that we need to move forward on, and we need to move forward with a sense of urgency. And I want to be a governor who is taking that approach and making a difference in people's lives. I also think in the national context right now, where our politics are so divisive, and we've got a president who doesn't seem to respect so many different people in this country, it's more important than ever that our governor here in Massachusetts is standing up for every single person, and people can count on the fact that I would be that governor. Well, I'm the only candidate in the race that has leadership experience in state government and in the private sector. I think that's going to matter. We all, as you mentioned, have a very ambitious, progressive agenda that we want to deliver on as governor. But I've actually been in a leadership position in state government. When I worked for Governor Patrick, I was his Secretary of Administration and Finance. And I often was his point person for negotiating a lot of the big reform legislation we got through the legislature. So I've been there, I've done it, I know how the process works, I've worked successfully through it. I think that that should matter because I think I'm best positioned as a result of that experience to deliver on the ambitious agenda we all want. The other thing is, Governor Baker's entire case for being governor is he's a great manager. He's actually failed at it. Every single thing he said he was going to fix as governor is worse than when he started. And I think to win in the general election, we're going to need to credibly take him on and expose those failings. I think based on my leadership experience and record of success in government and in the private sector, I'm best positioned to do that. I'm going to be able to make apples to apples comparisons and say things like, hey, when I was there managing the state budget during much tougher times, during the Great Recession, we managed through it successfully. We increased investment to record levels in infrastructure, public education, and we got the highest bond ratings in state history. And Governor Baker, you've screwed it up. You just got downgraded by one of the rating agencies for the first time in 30 years because you aren't following the responsible policies we put in place when I was there. I think that type of exposure of his failings and the ability to be able to take him on those issues in an apples-to-apples kind of way is going to matter for viability in the general election. Looking at the strength of our campaign so far, we have a lot of enthusiasm behind our campaign. I think we've already demonstrated that we are capable of building a strong campaign. We have thousands of supporters across this state. I've been going to meetings across the state for over a year now, Democratic town committee meetings, house parties, and we have lots of enthusiasm, lots of people signing up to help. We have, I think, outperformed the other candidates from a fundraising perspective, in terms of the caucuses that are going on now, where people are coming and showing up to run for delegate to the state convention. We've been doing very well in terms of organizing for the caucuses and have a lot of great results. So I think our campaign has a lot of momentum. We've got a lot of political support. Many more Democratic legislators have endorsed our campaign than either of the other two candidates. I'm feeling very encouraged by the level of momentum and strength our campaign has, and I think that also demonstrates that we can take on Charlie Baker, continue to build on this strength of our campaign, and be in a position at the end of the day where people are going to be informed about the choice in this race, which is going to be between a governor who has no record of making any meaningful difference on any issue that affects people's lives in a real way, and literally has no agenda to do so, and someone who desperately wants to do so and has the leadership experience to deliver on it. And at the end of the day, I think people are going to choose that. Well, at the highest level, I'd like people to think of my term in office as a time when we actually made a meaningful difference in people's lives and where we stood up for every single person in the state. There are lots of areas that I want to make progress on as governor. One that is near and dear to my heart, that is among my top priorities, is to ensure that every single child and family in this state has access to high-quality, affordable childcare and preschool. The evidence is clear. This is game-changing for young kids, particularly lower-income kids. If they have access to high-quality childcare and preschool, their success in school and in life is much better than if they don't. And it's the difference between parents being able to go to work and not. We are the most expensive state in the country. It costs about $15,000 a year to send one kid to childcare or preschool. And so there are a lot of parents, many of whom I meet along the campaign trail, who end up having to quit their job, one of the parents having to quit their job because they can't afford childcare and need to stay home with the child. That's a disservice to the child, it's a disservice to the family and to our broader economy when someone needs to leave the workforce as a result. So this is a top priority of mine. I've committed that by the end of my first term, every single child and family in this state will have access to high quality, affordable childcare and preschool. I'm going to have lots of priorities as governor, and we're going to get right out of the gate strong and trying to make progress on a lot of them. One that I'll mention that I think is really important we get started on right away is single-payer health care. Our healthcare system is broken. It's way too complicated for people to navigate. It is too expensive. It's not financially sustainable the way it is, and the quality of the care, honestly, isn't as good as it should be. I think we need to move to a single-payer system to get to the outcomes we need, which is a simpler, cheaper, better system that actually works better for people and gets better outcomes. If you believe, as I do, that every single person in this state should have access to the healthcare services they need to be as healthy as they can be, that this is a fundamental human right, the system we have today is not your system because it doesn't result in that outcome. Now, all three Democratic candidates in this race thankfully support moving to a single-payer system. But I am the only candidate in this race that actually has experience in the healthcare industry. I was chair of the board of the Health Connector for 3.5 years when we successfully implemented Massachusetts health reform that served as the model for Obamacare. And after I left the Patrick administration, I was CEO of a health insurance company that covered low-income people in the Medicaid program in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. So I know our healthcare industry. I know how dysfunctional it is. I know all the potential risks of moving to a single-payer system and potential pitfalls that we need to avoid. So I think I'm best positioned to provide the leadership to thoughtfully transition to a single-payer system as quickly as we can. This isn't going to be easy. This is 20% of our economy. We need to do it thoughtfully to make sure we get the outcomes we need. It's not going to be done in 5 minutes. But I think I'm best positioned to provide the leadership, to get the right people around the table, to design the system that we're going to need that gets to a simpler, cheaper, better system that actually works better for people. And I am 100% committed to making sure we get that done. The state can and must do a lot. We have an affordable housing crisis in this state, certainly in the greater Boston area, on the Cape, in the Berkshires, and other pockets of this state. It is a huge problem and one of those issues that can start to drag Massachusetts backwards if we aren't intentional about addressing it. I would do a few things. I would provide leadership on this area, acknowledge that we have a crisis, do the work to assess what the scope of the problem is and what our goal needs to be to actually address it in terms of the increase in affordable housing supply or other strategies, and develop a plan that we execute against with a sense of urgency to actually achieve that goal. We're going to need to increase the amount that the state subsidizes for affordable housing across the state, and I think we can do a better job coordinating all the different buckets of money that exist across different state agencies that work on subsidizing affordable housing supply to make sure they're all being coordinated in furtherance of this one common plan we need to develop. The other thing, we need regulatory reform. We need to take a fresh look at Chapter 40B. We need to make sure that it's not just Boston, Cambridge, and Somerville that are creating new affordable housing supply in the state, but communities throughout the greater Boston area. We need a system that ensures we're taking into account community interests and balancing those interests against the need for additional affordable housing supply. But we need additional affordable housing supply throughout the state, and we collectively in every community of this state have a responsibility for addressing this problem. I also think we need to think about how we use transportation as an affordable housing solution. For example, high-speed rail from Springfield to Boston, which is a project I support moving forward on, would be game-changing for the economy of Western Massachusetts. It also would be an affordable housing solution for the greater Boston area if we made it a commute from Springfield to Boston. So we need to think about how we use transportation to connect effectively to housing that exists in the state that already is affordable. I would make this a priority. I was at an event last night, once again, where a young millennial-aged woman cited this as a real issue affecting her life. And I hear it from lots of people across the state as I'm campaigning for governor. And it is going to be the difference if we don't address it with a sense of urgency between Massachusetts continuing to move forward or falling behind because people can't afford to live here, businesses can't attract the workforce they need. I will be a governor that prioritizes this and actually make sure we make progress on addressing this crisis. Well, there clearly is a connection, and we clearly have persistent structural barriers to communities of color being able to move forward. So as governor, there are a few things I would do. One, my entire agenda that I'm running on, a lot of these issues we've been talking about, affordable housing, affordable childcare and preschool, access to affordable health care, a lot of these issues, a lot of my agenda is about addressing those challenges that are holding people back, not exclusively communities of color, but making progress on those issues will disproportionately benefit communities of color and those who have been disproportionately held back. Beyond that, though, I think we need to be intentional about making sure we are giving communities of color opportunities to move forward. So there are things state government can do as an actor. And when I worked for Governor Patrick, I actually worked in this area. The Office of Access and Opportunity that we created in the Patrick administration reported to me. We did a lot of work to make sure that we were increasing the amount of business we were doing with minority-owned businesses that tend to employ more minorities and people in communities of color. We did things to increase access to capital for those businesses. So there's some things that we can build on, and as governor, I would be intentional about building on to try to create more opportunities for communities of color. Beyond that, we need to address some of the structural barriers and structural areas where we see real disparities in race, like our criminal justice system as an example. And I have made a series of reform proposals in this area that I think we need to take seriously and need to make progress on, because our criminal justice system has been disproportionately impacting communities of color in Massachusetts more so than in other states. And it is one of those structural barriers to communities of color being able to move forward. And that would be a big focus and priority of mine. First of all, I'm the only candidate in the race that's actually had to go through that process during the toughest times in decades. I was Governor Patrick's Secretary of Administration and Finance during the Great Recession, the biggest fiscal crisis we had faced in many, many years. And so I was in the position of figuring out how do we responsibly finance all the important things state government does, having to make tough decisions, but also figuring out ways to make record investments in infrastructure and in education and in other areas. So I'm the only candidate that's actually been there and done it during the toughest times. We need new revenue. I mean, we got to be honest about that. We've got a governor right now who fails to acknowledge that, who pretends like we don't. He's been fiscally irresponsible. He's setting us up for a fiscal crisis. In order to support the important programs and services that state government is funding today, let alone the types of transformational investments we need to make in areas like transportation, we've got one of the worst systems in the country and we need to invest more in it, or making childcare and preschool available to everyone, or our K-12 education system, which we are not adequately funding today, particularly for lower income districts. We need additional revenue. That's why I support the millionaire's tax, which will be on the ballot in 2018. It is the fairest, meaningful new revenue proposal we've had for a very long time. It would generate about $2 billion a year that we desperately need for investments in transportation and education, and it'd be paid for from the 19,500 taxpayers in this state who are doing great, earning over $1 million a year, asking them to pay a little bit more to make some of these important investments. There are also areas where we can spend less. I really believe if we're thoughtful about how we move to a single-payer system, we should overall spend less on healthcare in Massachusetts than we do today. There's a lot of waste and inefficiency in our multi-payer system that we can cut out if we do it thoughtfully. Criminal justice reform. We're spending lots of money, $1.2 billion a year, to put people in jail for a very long time. This is an area where I think if we invest more in the underlying causes of crime, like mental health services and addiction services, we can actually get better outcomes for people, safer communities, and save taxpayers a lot of money. So in some areas, if we're smarter about how we're spending government funds, we should actually get better outcomes and save money that we can invest in some of the areas that we desperately need it. So look, it'd be great if Amazon decided to come to Massachusetts. I don't think we should get them here by giving them a bunch of taxpayer money. We have, the recent GE deal, in my view, was way too rich. And what we were promised for it was 800 jobs, which we're not even getting. There are many small businesses across this state and other businesses who are already in Massachusetts who are making decisions to continue to invest in this state and grow jobs here for whom we do nothing. I think the most important economic development strategy we could have is to do the stuff government is supposed to do well. Affordable housing, a transportation system that businesses and workers can depend on to get to work on time, a great education system, workforce training. This is what we should be spending taxpayer money on, not giving tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars to a multi-billion-dollar company with the hope that they come to Massachusetts. Now, if they were to come here and create a lot of jobs here without that, that would be great. We should be enticing them to. We also, I liked the way you asked the question, what would the impact be? It would be a serious strain on our infrastructure. It would contribute to the challenges of our affordable housing supply. It would put more pressure on our transportation infrastructure. And so I think we need to be honest about the fact that some of these areas we face big challenges in today would become bigger challenges if Amazon were here. We've got a governor right now who fails to recognize in a sufficient way, in my view, the extent of the challenges today. We need to address those challenges to be able to accommodate additional growth in business like Amazon. So I don't support increasing charter schools, the charter school cap. I oppose the ballot question that would do so in 2016. Charter schools initially were contemplated to be the exception and places where we tried new things. And to the extent some innovations in some of these few charter schools worked, that we would replicate them in the broader system. That's not the path that we're on, and it's certainly not the path that Charlie Baker is trying to take us on. What I don't like about his approach is he is essentially trying to create a separate school system. The most important thing we do together through government is ensure that every single child has access to a great public education. Every child. And this strategy of trying to create a few more charter schools for a few more kids without focusing at all on all the other kids, even if you believed the charter schools were better quality, which there are a lot of arguments about whether they are or not, What about everybody else? In my view, we should be working with a sense of urgency to make sure every single public school is great for every kid. And public education is not a place where we should be creating a competitive dynamic. There can't be winners and losers when it comes to public education. Every school needs to be great. I would invest more in our public education system. The state has fallen down on its constitutional responsibility to adequately fund public education in this state. I support the recommendations of the Legislative Commission a couple of years ago for reforming our formula and the amount we need to invest in it, particularly to help lower income districts across this state. I think we also need to be looking at a lot of the factors outside of the walls of the school that impacts a child's ability to learn. Things like making sure they're ready to learn when they come to school, child care and preschool that I talked about before. Making sure that we're addressing the other factors like hunger and safety and housing that affect a child's ability to learn in school, and not make teachers assume the entire responsibility for stuff that really is not within their control. So those would be the areas of focus for me, not creating a separate system of charter schools. I think we are jailing way too many for way too long at too high a cost to our society. Here are some things that I think we need to do. Invest much more in the underlying causes of crime, like providing mental health services, addiction services. Most people in our jails in Massachusetts are either suffering from mental illness or addiction. If we do a better job getting them the help they need, they're less likely to end up committing crimes and in our criminal justice system to begin with. I think we need to expand drug courts and other diversionary programs to try to address those underlying causes instead of just putting people in jail every time. I think we need more programming for people who are in jail to help make sure they're successful when they get out. We don't want people, once they get out, not having the supports they need or not having the preparedness they need to be successful when they get out and just end up back in jail. I think we need to reform our bail system and eliminate cash bail. Really take a hard look at our system of fees and fines, all of which are contributing to many people in Massachusetts being put in jail just because they're poor. I think we need to eliminate all mandatory minimum sentences except for murder. I think we need to let judges do their job and assess the individual facts and circumstances of every person who's before them and every crime that they're accused of in determining the appropriate sentence. So I've made a very comprehensive set of proposals. You can find all of them on my website. But this is an area I feel passionately about, and I think if we are thoughtful about this in ways that other states have already gone down the path of reforming their criminal justice system, we can not only get better outcomes for people, we can get safer communities, and we can save taxpayers a lot of money. So this is a really important issue. At the end of the day, what this gets down to is making sure that elections and government policy are influenced by regular people and not just the wealthy special interests. So I support whatever we can do to make it as easy as possible for people to vote. If we can do automatic voter registration, same-day voter registration, whatever we can do to make it as easy as possible for people to vote, I will support that. I also think when it comes to campaign finance reform, so this is another area where I think I'm the only candidate that's made a series of proposals in this area. I will support, and I was the first candidate in this state, I think, to sign a pledge to make sure that Massachusetts is supporting a United States constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. I also have made a series of proposals to strengthen Massachusetts campaign finance laws, to enhance disclosure requirements, to close what I refer to as the Charlie Baker loophole. He somehow figured out a way to violate the letter and spirit of our campaign finance laws, which limit individual donations to state candidates to no more than $1,000 a year. by creating this scheme through the National Republican Party, where he's collecting checks of $43,000 from individual donors, funneling them up to the National Party, back down to the state party for his benefit. Some of that money is being used to support candidates like Roy Moore in Alabama, and the rest of it is coming down to support him. It is totally inconsistent with the purpose of our campaign finance laws here in Massachusetts. It's enabling wealthy donors who have interests before Charlie Baker to have special influence and access to him. And he's got other problems in this area, which I've been very vocal about. He basically ran, and his team ran, this charter school ballot question campaign that we were talking about before. And there were shell organizations, it's been determined, that were used to basically do political money laundering and funnel huge, multi-million-dollar undisclosed personal donations through these shell organizations back down to support Charlie Baker's charter school ballot question campaign that were found to have been illegal, the highest campaign finance fines in state history. And I have called for an investigation by the Attorney General or the Inspector General into Charlie Baker's role in soliciting those illegal donations. I think we need transparency on this. Obviously, we need to be doing this at a global level. Climate change is the biggest threat to our planet right now. It'd be nice if we were doing it at the national level instead of moving backwards under the Trump administration and the Republican Congress we have. But we should do everything we can that's within our control. And that means we should be a leader, in my view, on climate change. We should be doing everything we can to get to a clean energy economy as quickly as we can. I support becoming the first state in the nation to adopt carbon pricing if we need to, which I think we need to because all the economists agree this is a really important incentive that will drive us to a clean energy economy quicker. I think we need to accelerate our transition to renewable energy sources and increase our renewable portfolio standard to ensure our utilities are being aggressive about their transition to renewable energy sources. I think we need to oppose any expansion in natural gas pipeline infrastructure across the state, and we need to oppose it vociferously. We've got a governor right now who's taken the opposite view and is supporting the expansion of natural gas pipeline infrastructure by his wealthy special interest utility friends, who he's been doing a lot of favors for, which I've been pointing out as strongly as I can. The other thing I think we need to recognize is this presents a huge opportunity for Massachusetts. The clean energy sector is going to be one of the fastest growing sectors in the world in the next couple of decades. And Massachusetts could be a world leader in supporting the growth in that industry. We could create thousands and thousands and thousands of jobs here in Massachusetts if we're intentional about it. But we need leadership to be intentional about it. There are other environmental priorities we need to have. Under Governor Baker, the Department of Environmental Protection does not have the resources it needs to make sure that we're protecting our environment in this state. The Department of Conservation and Recreation does not have the resources it needs to maintain the parks that across the state that people depend on. As governor, I would make environmental protection not just combating climate change, but environmental protection across the board and our environment a priority. And I would put the resources into making sure we're doing what we need to do to be good stewards. So this is an area where we need leadership, and we don't have it right now. I have put out a series of proposals for expanding economic opportunities for women. I think we need to be intentional about that. Everything from increasing the minimum wage, making access to childcare and preschool affordable for everybody, paid family leave. I have said that in state government, I would have an independent review done to ensure state government is complying with the pay equity laws and requirements. I would ensure that every single vendor that does business with state government is meeting their obligations to ensure pay equity. I've also said we need to do more to make sure that women are entering leadership positions across the board. So I have proposed that if governor, businesses that are doing business with state government, I would require that at least 30% of their corporate boards are composed of women and minorities, where there's a huge dearth right now of women serving on corporate boards and in leadership positions in government. So this is a big priority of mine. I've made a series of, I think I'm the only candidate that's made a series of proposals to expand economic opportunity for women. When it comes to the Me Too movement, it is clear that this is a sickness in our culture. Sexual harassment and assault is much more pervasive, I think, than even we understand right now. And we need to stop tolerating the intolerable. I would insist that we take a hard look at the systems in place today that clearly aren't working to try to prevent this conduct from happening and to ensure women and others who are subjected to this conduct have legitimate avenues for raising it when it happens. Take a hard look at that and figure out what we need to do to bolster those systems and ensure they're actually working. I'd keep a bright light on the Me Too movement, make sure that we are continuing to talk about these issues, and I would take a stand and make sure that men who are engaging in this horrific conduct are held accountable. So as an example, not only men, but to the extent businesses and employers and other institutions enable it and facilitate it by not taking action when they know about it, that they're held accountable too. So I have said that I believe the Gaming Commission should revoke the license from Wynn Casino Company. Even after Steve Wynn has left the company, it seems clear from the reporting the Wall Street Journal has done that this is a company that knew this conduct was happening. They failed to do anything about it. They failed to disclose it to the Gaming Commission when they were going through the process of applying for their license. And to me, as long as the Gaming Commission confirms those facts, that license should be revoked. We shouldn't tolerate that behavior. One other thing, I've been spending time as a candidate trying to better understand this issue and why it's happening and what is happening. I met with some women who work in the restaurant industry, which is the industry that has the most pervasive level of sexual harassment in it. And one of the key drivers of why, according to them and what it sounds like, is the fact that in Massachusetts and most other states, there is a sub-minimum wage for workers who earn tips. So people in the restaurant industry in Massachusetts, the minimum wage is $3.75, not the $11 that it is for everyone else. And as a result, it requires them to tolerate behavior from customers from whom they're dependent on tips for their income, or from their managers or from the cooks who they're dependent on in order to serve their customers well. They tolerate behavior that is intolerable. And in states where they've eliminated the sub-minimum wage, the amount of sexual harassment has gone down. So I support eliminating it in Massachusetts. I've been a strong proponent of that, and if I'm governor, we will get that done. We've got a president right now who is moving the wrong direction on LGBTQ rights. And so it is more important than ever that we have leadership here that is supporting our LGBTQ community and supporting their rights in every way possible. There's going to be a ballot question that on the ballot in 2018 that proposes to turn back rights that were passed into law a couple of years ago protecting the transgender community. We have a governor right now who reluctantly signed that legislation into law. He provided no leadership on this issue. He ended up signing the transgender rights legislation into law behind a closed door. He didn't hold a bill signing ceremony. Maura Healey had to hold a fake bill signing ceremony so that the people whose rights were protected could celebrate the protection of their rights, because Charlie Baker wouldn't do it. That is not okay. It's not okay. And as governor, transgender people, people from the LGBT community more broadly, every single person in this state will be 100% confident that their governor is there for them and will fight to protect their rights and will do whatever I need to do to ensure that people know they can count on me and our government and their government to be there for them. And that is how strongly I feel about making sure we're protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community, but also everybody else in this state.